Welcome. I'm Professor Owen Anderson, and I'm a professor of philosophy and religious studies at Arizona State University, and also a faculty associate at Phoenix Seminary, where I teach philosophical theology. But today, all of my opinions are my own. And I'm very excited because I'm joined with Arizona State Representative Quang Nguyen, who represents Prescott, and he has a great story. In fact, he's got multiple great stories that I want the people of Arizona and everybody watching to know about him, because he is a war immigrant who now is a representative in Arizona. And that's an amazing story. And I think we've talked about this before, Representative. If you were on the side of the left, you would be praised throughout all of Democrat circles for being a war refugee immigrant, first such elected to office in Arizona. Have you ever received any accolades for this?
Well, first of all, Dr. Anderson, I'm so glad to have met you because we went through this ASU fiasco recently. And so because of the infringement of freedom of expression, I get a chance to meet you. And now we're having a conversation.
Yeah.
I would say if I had been on the left side, a liberal, I think I would have received more, comments from the left, from the media and so on. But because I am a Republican, but that's sort of like a fun story, right?
Yeah.
It's if anything I said, it'd be editorial on my part. And so but it is interesting though, isn't it?
It is. I only mention it because identity politics is so important to the left,
right?
But it's only important if you qualify with the right beliefs.
If
you don't have those beliefs, And so it's just hypocrisy. They don't really care about any politics. It's just a way of promoting their own beliefs. But I want to hear, and I think everyone would love to hear. Can we start just with your story? Tell us about where you were raised and how you came to America.
Well, so let's go back to the very beginning, and I'll try to speed up as much as I can. I was born in Vietnam, in South Vietnam in 1962. But to go back to my dad actually had about 40 years of war conflicts since he was 16 years old until his retirement as the lieutenant colonel in the South Vietnamese Army back in 1973. Incidentally, 73 is when combat troops from the United States got pulled out, leaving Vietnam to sort of fend for itself between 73 and 75. So I was born before the escalation of the war. So the escalation really got really bad between 64 and 65 and onward to 1973. So I had an opportunity to live from the very beginning of the war until 6 days before the fall of Saigon.
Wow.
So, I never thought of a day of being an American. I mean, that just never entered my mind. Mm-hmm. I don't know freedom the way I understand freedom today. We have such a tiny, short little document, and it's called the U.S. Constitution that we didn't have, and I didn't understand. I did have no idea what the Bill of Rights were until I came here and understand that, my gosh, God has given this country, this great country, and handed it to me for free.
Yeah.
And the only thing I have is really the ability to absorb the information, to study and understand how this was handed to me. And if anything at all, just try to maintain it and make it better.
Wow. Yeah. Well, and what happened? What were the circumstances and how you were able to come here then?
So about 6 days before the fall of Saigon, my dad just picked me up in his Willie Jeep and just picked my brother up and I up and drove to the Tan Son Nhut airfield, military airfield, and said, "You're gonna get on that plane right there, the C-130, and you may or may not ever see us again."
Wow! So he didn't come with you?
No, he didn't, because there was a whole family behind still. A family that he knew that worked for the CIA at one time. So people that worked for the CIA get evacuated immediately. And so one of his friends called him up and said, I can take 2 of your kids.
Wow. How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I have five older brothers, but two of them were on the battlefields at the time that was happening.
Wow. So they
I
get
have an
three.
older brother that was uh, an airborne soldier from 1968 to 1975, and he was wounded three times. He made it. He lives in the United States now, but
Wow.
he was in combat for about 7 years.
Did
And
did your parents and all your brothers end up coming here then?
yeah, we all made it. We all
Oh,
made
wow.
it.
Okay.
And I flew out on the C-130. April 30th was the fall of Saigon. Remember the helicopter on top
Hmm.
of the hotel?
Yeah.
Um, my parents and the rest of my older brothers was they were on a barge, and that was floated out of the Saigon River out to the ocean.
Wow.
And the USS Miller just happened to be out there.
Wow.
I
That's
mean,
amazing.
yeah. So God loves us. That's all I
Yeah.
can.
Amen. Amen. And I'm going to come to that in a minute. But finishing that part of the story, so you end up in California.
Yeah, actually, we went to the Philippines. The C-130 flew us to the Philippines, about maybe a couple of hundred people on that plane. And then from there on, another plane flew us to Guam, where we have to register, we have to write down who we are. And the majority of those people were already vetted before they got on the plane because they worked for the United States at the
Yeah.
time, or the US government. Um, and then from Guam, we get vaccinated, we get vetted, yeah, severely vetted. Um, so then from then on, we flew over to Travis Air Force Base, and I was there for a week. And then we went to Camp Pendleton. My brother and I went to Camp Pendleton Marine Corps Base down in near San Diego, San Diego. And
Hmm.
then we flew to Fort Chaffee, and I was there for months.
Wow. But then you went on, because you've told me before that you went on to college and you were working at a college.
Yeah, I is amazing. I came over. I didn't speak a word of English. Right, I was
Wow.
13 years old, 14 years old. I went to high school, and after going through college, high school and college, somebody decided to hire me as a part-time professor at a state university, and I wound up teaching there for a couple of years. And
Wow.
it was very difficult to understand that you learn a language in 75, and by 86, you're teaching. It
Yeah.
was kind of a weird situation for me. But I was always one of those kids that, look at our books behind you, right? I was
Mhm.
always one of those kids that just absorb as much as I can.
Yeah.
And shamefully, I will tell you, I learned my English from watching Sesame Street, right? Big Bird
Wow.
and all these things. And just to be able to do that, went to work for Northrop Aircraft, was one of the first people to work on the FA-18 Hornet, in the
Wow.
very beginning days, and then go on to be a state legislator at some point after that.
In
I
California?
No, here.
Oh,
I
here.
mean,
Okay. Yeah.
after 29 years living in California, my
Yeah.
job was transferred to Phoenix, and that's how
Oh, I see.
Arizona in 2004. So I've been
Okay.
here for a little while, almost 20 years.
Hmm.
But how great is this country, right?
Yeah.
We
Yeah. You
get to
go from war immigrant to teaching at college and representing your community.
right, and in such a short time. And I would say
Yeah.
it's a short time. I
Yeah.
mean, not too long ago, we were facing Pol Pot and the killing fields in Cambodia, and
Mhm.
hundreds of thousands of people died in Vietnam. After the war, not before the war.
Mhm.
We're
Yeah.
talking hundreds of thousands of people that died after the war, and somehow I wound up being here and doing what I'm doing, and it's amazing for me to even sitting here talking to you, Dr. Anderson.
Yeah. I'm really blessed to hear this story, and it leads me to ask the next question, which is, you said, "Thank God," and I'm fascinated to find out that you're a Roman Catholic, but you come from a country that was war torn over atheist Marxism, but also has a strong Buddhist background. How did you become Roman Catholic?
Well, I came from a Buddhist family, a non-practicing Buddhist family. My parents were,
Mhm.
and in so many ways, they were busy. My dad was busy on the battlefields.
Yeah.
My mom was busy raising children. So we're a non-practicing Buddhist family. I came over here, and there was, I remember sitting at Fort Chaffee, looking at a chapel
Oh, wow.
where majority of the Vietnamese there were Roman Catholics, and they would go to mass. And I'm sitting there, I'm wondering, what's in that building? Why all these people going in there? And is there something in my life that's quite empty, that I was constantly looking for something? I'm
Yeah.
trying to understand my life, and watching those people going into the Catholic Church. After I left the refugee camp, I came to a community, small community in Central California called Delhi. And there I went to a Baptist church.
Oh, wow.
And that's where I found God
Wow, really?
through that way. And to make a long story short, I met my future wife, and she's a Roman Catholic. She was a cradle Catholic. And she said, why don't you come to church with me?
Hmm.
And being a Baptist, I'm kind of like, I want to find out if there's something else out there.
Yeah.
So I went to church with her. I took catechism.
Mhm.
I agreed to become a Catholic, and I took catechism, and one thing led to
Yeah.
another. We became a Catholic family, and I'm so glad to be a Christian brother.
Yeah. Yep. Amen. Well, and what's amazing is you've lived these different parts of what America offers in terms of coming here as a war immigrant, war refugee immigrant, and then pursuing a career, pursuing college, having success. But then you also lived religious freedom where you were allowed to explore and ask the question, what's in that building? And end up at a Baptist church, then end up in Roman Catholicism. So you've lived so many of these experiences that you're then able to help Americans who maybe they've taken those for granted, help them remember how important they are.
It's I don't think about it. When I was in Vietnam, every day I wake up, I don't think about a war. I don't think about freedom, because I didn't know what the word freedom meant. So to me, you get up in the morning. There is a war when you get up. There's a war when you have lunch. There's a war when you're in school. There's a war going on when you go to bed, right?
Wow.
And I used to live about 30 yards away from a Buddhist temple, where all the pine boxes are coming home.
Wow.
And we're talking pine boxes. We're not talking about a nice casket that, American soldiers had that available. We're talking about people dying every day, and these soldiers are coming home to the Buddhist temple, and the parents be wailing at night, deep into the night. And as a child, I listened to that every night. My mom has to listen to it, or had to listen to it, when her two oldest sons are at the time were still in the battlefield. So
wow.
I can't imagine what my mom and dad were going through. And to find religious freedom here is just amazing. I don't think about it anymore. I just said, it's time for me to really act and behave when I call myself a Christian.
Yeah.
It's a very difficult environment to go to the House of Legislature, to the legislature, and seeing what I see every day.
Yeah.
And it's a very difficult situation for me, even as a Christian.
Right. Oh yeah, I bet. Tell us about that now. Tell us about how you ended up in politics, and then we can get into the question of religious or freedom of speech.
Right. So for years I've been involved. As a matter of fact, I was one of the original members of the Tea Party back in 2009. Wow. In the city of Prescott, in the town of Prescott Valley, where I live. And I remember being so involved in national politics, and I had great concerns when President Obama was elected. So I became a Tea Party member. And back then, the Tea Party member was very cohesive. We had a goal, which is expose whatever facts Obama was representing at the time.
Yeah.
Socialism, those concepts, those evil concepts. And by the way, I just want to talk about socialism real quickly.
Yeah.
Before I go back to how I got involved with politics, is that I always look at socialism as a tiny stepping stone to communism. And people ask me, well, what's the difference? I say, well, big difference, right? Not really. One has an AK-47 already, and the other one is looking for one. That's how I equate the difference between socialism and communism. Not much different, right?
Yeah.
And so Speaker Bowers and I were friends but we're not political friends. We still are family friends. So every few years or so, he would call me up and he'd say, Quang, you got to run for office. And I said, no, I'm too dumb. I don't know anything about state politics and local politics. I'm not going to do this. So in 2009, he and former President Fan came and cornered me and said, you got to run for office. You
Wow.
got to represent LD1.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, kids are gone. What the heck? And I threw my name in the hat, and amazingly, somehow I won out of 10 people running for the primary
Wow.
at the time. And somehow I wound up as a top vote getter out of the primary. And
Wow.
here I am.
Yeah. And so you've been serving since then, 2009?
No, 2021 was
okay.
my first time. So 2019 is when they came.
19. I got you. Okay.
Right. I'm sorry if I misspoke.
Gotcha. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So but how did you share a story with me about a mentor at college who told you to keep your politics to yourself?
Yeah, Professor Martin. It's funny that when I was a sophomore in college, I met Professor Martin, and he was my professor when I was doing my undergraduate studies. And when I got my teaching job, he was still there, and he said to me, Quang, you and I agree on a lot of things here, but I just want you to know, keep it to yourself if you want to keep your job.
Wow.
And amazingly, they actually changed his major, and I think I mentioned this to you, in order to get rid of Professor Martin.
Wow.
They changed the name of the major to make sure that he's no longer needed in this other major.
Wow. Yeah, so they can room. So that brings us then to what we're dealing with at the state universities, because you're seeing some of that same behavior now in the Arizona universities.
Yeah, it's kind of difficult. You hear about it a lot. You read about it a lot, but until it happens right in front of your nose, it takes a different form of understanding and say to yourself, you know, freedom of speech is actually being infringed upon. There are 39 people that actually signed a letter to accuse somebody of being a white nationalist. And you and I spoke, and I said that in committee. A state senator and in 21 referred to me as a white nationalist. And by the way, I took a picture of that tweet, so it's not like
good. They can't take it back. Yeah. You're not the normal candidate for being a white nationalist.
Yeah, it's very difficult. But to have, you know, as I said in my opening statement, you might want to have multiple views, especially at a college level, especially when you're teaching 17, 18, 19-year-olds. You might want to expose them to multiple views, even if you don't like it, even if you don't like the Confederate flag, even if you don't think General Lee was a good person. You have to expose everything. You know, recently I was at the university talking about Thomas Jefferson and how many people demonized him for being a slave owner. And my reply to that is very simple. If we didn't have the founders and the US Constitution, today you and I be speaking British English.
You probably wouldn't be here at all. And I might not be here either. My family came
you think about
ago.
It. Somehow do you think the British would be so nice? Right? I mean, look at the history, India and so on. Right? So to say that, and I'm not saying that hey, listen, we can't judge people from 200 years ago by today's standard. That's how I see it. But I'm thankful for what they have done for us today. Agree or not?
It seems like there's a real difficulty the left has in noticing both the good and the bad. And so they react to the good by only pointing out the bad. Right.
And here's my proof to why this is the greatest country. You don't see a line leaving, do you?
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. This is a great country.
Well, you'll see that a lot of times famous movie stars will say during election time, if this person, this Republican gets elected president, I'm moving. And they never, ever do.
Hey, you know what? I'll chip in for the one-way ticket.
Yeah.
A lot of us will, right? We'll chip in.
None of them ever leave.
Yeah, none of them are leaving. And I got to tell you, as an immigrant and as somebody that actually came from a communist conflict, um, I would dare say that I respect and enjoy my freedom more than most.
Yeah.
Because I know what it's like not having freedom. I know what it's like having to look for food on a daily basis. I know what it's like when you have stray bullets flying around. I know what it's like when you have an explosion in your neighborhood.
Yeah. Well, I think you mentioned socialism. So it seems that a lot of times the way that communism gets a foothold is by bringing up solutions to problems that pull on people's heartstrings. So the plight of the poor or the downtrodden, and they'll say, look, nothing's being done for them. The rich just step on them, and we need a solution to help people get a leg up in life. And for a lot of people, they say, yeah, that's really important. I want to do that. And that pulls them into the orbit of big government solutions because the answer is always, how do we help the poor? Bigger government.
Right, right. And I will tell you, if you look at the university system, not talking about just Arizona, around the country, if you look at the university system, without money, they wouldn't exist. And where did money come from?
Yeah.
Where does it come from? It comes from capitalism.
Yeah.
My dad used to tell me several things when I was growing up. Well, and Ronald Reagan actually said it. I believe it was Ronald Reagan, right? Right. So how does communism come about? How is it possible for them to exist? They're not building a foundation for themselves. They have to steal money from somebody else, and that money came from capitalism, right? And here's another thing. I get really disappointed in legislators from both sides bringing up the word communism or the word communist to describe their colleagues, or whatever it is, or policy. I'm sorry. Communism is an interesting concept. Is that if you don't live it, you really don't understand it. I mean, you can read it in books, you can listen to lectures, and you can watch YouTubes, right?
Yeah.
But when you start going to funerals of your family members, it's a different turn.
Yeah. Comes
So
home for reality hits home.
right. So when people say, well, this is a communist policy, I'm not easily insulted, but I gotta tell you, just leave it out of it. You don't understand it.
Yeah.
Okay, you just don't understand it until you know what it's like to have to go down to a bunker to avoid an incoming mortar.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not policy. Yeah, maybe it's policy related. Yeah, policy related. We don't like a policy for XYZ, but don't overuse it because you kind of dilute the meaning of what
Yeah,
it's
that's
like.
true. And I think for me, I only use the word Marxist for professors who identify as Marxists,
I
and some of them
agree with
do.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I don't want, because I don't want to mislabel anybody. If someone says I'm not a Marxist, I'll take them at their word. However, a lot of times what you'll find out is they might, for the few that say they're not Marxists, because many say they are Marxists, the few that say they're not Marxists, they still teach the Communist Manifesto.
right.
And so it's like, I don't,
Stalin is still revered by so many people.
yeah,
Stalin
yeah.
of all people, right? Or Mao, or in my case, Ho Chi Minh, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's kind of weird for me to look back and say, I actually understood who Ho Chi Minh was.
Right. Yeah. Wow.
It's not a book that I read.
Yeah.
My gosh, I see it every day on the street.
Yeah. So let me ask you then, specifically to the university problem we're facing. Yesterday, ABOR had a meeting about free speech at the three universities. And I tuned into the live link, and all they did was they read a report from each of the three Arizona universities. And of course, the universities all said, hey, we're doing great. And ABOR put that into their own report and said, we're doing great. And nothing was done. How can you correct that? We need you to help us get ABOR to do their job.
Right, right. So I know this is going to go public, but I think I was the only person in the education committee last year that voted against the continuation of ABOR.
Mm-hmm.
It's constitutional, right? So I don't have a choice, but I do have to voice my opinion. And some of the people are gonna see the post and they're gonna dislike me. But here's another personal thing. that I faced as a member of the Judiciary Committee last year, as a member, not a chair as of this year. But when we brought up the Second Amendment, all the state universities stood against it. Mm-hmm. I had a bill that actually would allow CCW holders to carry on campus. Well, why is the Second Amendment excluded by a border at the university? You can carry your gun, you're
the criminals
totally harmless, but don't you dare step onto cross the border into the university. And they all stood against it. So am I surprised where they're iffy about the First Amendment? Because they're iffy about the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
That's also a part of the Constitution. If you're iffy about the second, I say you're pretty iffy about the first as well.
Yeah, well, and so let me throw out their answer, which was, hey, we had this event with Dennis Prager and Charlie Kirk, and 1,000 people attended. What's the problem?
Well, the problem is, number one, 39 people stood up against it and used, name callings, right?
Yeah.
And then the second
ASU,
thing is,
and use ASU resources too.
Right. ASU resources. And then there's the thing that they don't want to admit to is students intimidation.
Yeah, that's a big one.
I mean, when you're looking at 17, 18 years old and your professor, 40, 50, 60 years old standing there and said, don't you dare go to that one. Mm-hmm. Because it's a white supremacist event. I mean, you're 17 years old. What do you know? I remember when I was 17, I was a total goofball. On top of that, my English was so little that I knew so little that I would be intimidated. And then during the committee, you notice how they talk about how, well, not a single person filed a complaint, a student. Well, if I'm scared, why would I?
Yeah, why would you file a complaint to the deans who enable this behavior and agree with the professors you're complaining about?
Exactly.
The students aren't dumb. They know these deans aren't going to listen.
We have to look at it, coming from where I'm coming from a communist war. You have to look at it and say, why are you so afraid of multiple views? Even if it's evil, why are you so afraid of it? Don't we still talk about Nazi Germany in history? Mm-hmm. Because we don't want Nazi Germany to come back, or fascism of any type to come back, right?
Yeah.
So why would we want to not expose our children to it?
Well, and especially because I agree 100%. The philosopher John Stuart Mill wrote a book on freedom of the press and freedom of speech. And he said, you really want every view to be exposed publicly, because the dumber the view is, he didn't use the word dumber, but the worse a view is, the more you want people to see it, because then they can assess it that way. You don't want to hide it from them, because it almost makes something interesting if you hide it. People say, well, I wonder what that is. Why won't they let me hear it? But what's problematic here is they're calling what's really mainstream conservatism white nationalism. And so whereas many leftist professors do identify as Marxist, none of the people on that panel identify as white nationalists. So you're not calling them what they claim to be. You're impugning them with something they would agree with you is a terrible thing. No one agrees on that panel with white nationalism. And so that's a big problem. You can't even be a mainstream conservative at ASU without faculty calling you out.
Right. And in my case, Asian is the new whites, right? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
and I remember people were always talking about, and I'll just bring this up because they talk about crime against Asians, and I remember being interviewed for that crime against Asian, and I said the biggest bunch of people that committed crimes against Asians, they all wear white shirt and ties, and they run universities like the Ivy League, right? So you want to limit those people. You want to take opportunities away from Asians.
That happened with Harvard, right? That was a lawsuit with Harvard that they were limiting.
That was at Harvard, and they have a different point systems,
right? Yeah,
to make sure that we're gonna limit. And I remember, I won't mention the university, but I applied for an MBA at a California UC university, And I was on the phone and I was asking why I was rejected for my MBA program. And by the way, a UC system rejected me, but Duquesne University accepted me. The Illinois Institute of Technology accepted me, right? New York Institute of Technology accepted me.
Wow.
But yet a UC University near my home said no. So I called them up and the lady was very polite and he said, yeah, we do have too many Asians applying.
Wow. They said that to you?
Yep.
Unbelievable.
Yep. And
How do we
so
get to a place like this where
that was, by the way, that was in the early 90s.
wow. And it's only gotten worse since then.
Yeah. So the system is driven against a certain type of people, and it rewards certain type of people.
But what happened that race? I mean, that's racism, but it calls itself not racism,
right?
And this very idea, Martin Luther King said, we should judge each other based on our character, not our skin color.
Right.
And the left has not followed that. They consistently judge based on your skin color. And this summer, the Supreme Court had to overturn those kind of racist policies. Right. How did that become so common?
It's very gradual, but it's planned. It didn't happen overnight, and as I mentioned to you earlier about the case of Harvard University being sued. If you want to give points to certain people on top of their SAT scores, if you want to give additional points, do it. I don't care, but don't take points away from my kid who actually stayed up until 2 o'clock in the morning doing homework and studying because, and by the way, when you look at my wife and I, you're not supposed to call us tiger parents because we're not. And I have to tell you, this is what I said to my son and daughter. And I said, if you want to be a janitor, that's fine. You want to throw newspaper, that's fine. You want to be a doctor, a lawyer, or whatever you want to do. You just got to make sure you be the best at it. And that was the only conversation I had with my kids regarding education.
Wow.
And I let them excel on their own.
Yeah.
So if they excel and take the time, put the time into it, don't take points away.
Yeah, then the system takes points off for that.
Right. And that's unacceptable.
Yeah.
It's just unacceptable. I don't know how we got there. Actually, I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah.
How did we get there? I don't know.
But what can we do? So what can be done about ABOR not looking and not critically thinking about the university's reports, just accepting them and moving on? What can we do about that? How can we get them to?
I think we need to continue to stand up and question these people every time they show up in committees. I think another option is to, I'm in appropriations. I have the option of voting yes or no on things. And I'm going to exercise it case by case. I'm going to make sure that I have my voice in some way.
Good.
And I'm going to be fair to everyone. I'm not going to be unfair. I'm going to be fair to everyone. And I'm just going to say, hey, look, did you resolve this problem?
Yeah, I think that your committee said they had 60 days after July 18th to get back to you.
Right. I want to see what's happening, and I don't expect to. Well, I shouldn't. I'm not going to expect anything good or bad one way or the other. I'm just going to wait and see and read the actual report.
Good, yeah.
And like I said in my closing statement, while I agree with Dr. Crow, let's really practice what we preach.
Yeah.
I mean, I can say I'm a Second Amendment guy, right? I'm the president of Arizona State Rifle and Pistol Association. I can stand up in my soapbox and talk about how I support the Second Amendment all day long. But if I never lifted a finger to defend the Second Amendment, I'm not practicing what I preach.
Right.
And that's what happens to a lot of legislators. Get on a soapbox, but please do something.
Yeah. Well, same in my profession. Professors, they'll speak very big. They'll talk largely about social programs, helping people. But when it comes down to it, they're not willing to stand up and defend free speech, which is, I think, very simple, basic freedom. Because if we don't have that, we don't have the other ones.
We don't have anything. We actually don't have anything. I
Yeah.
mean, might as well go back to Vietnam, right? During the war.
Yep.
You know, so,
Well, and what's happened is that what troubles me is how easy it is for a professor to use their classroom to promote their personal political agenda, because
that
we're
is a powerful
hired.
position.
Yeah, well, and we're hired as state employees for specific topics. So, for example, I teach religion in America and I teach introduction to philosophy, and I'm not supposed to just go in and make that Professor Anderson time where I share my personal beliefs about things. I'm supposed to cover those subjects. But it's almost as if these professors think that because they've become accomplished in one area of research, they become experts on everything and they should mold and craft these young students. And there's got to be some way to prohibit that and make sure professors just do what they're hired to do and don't bring in their personal beliefs.
And you and I had the conversation. We had a slight disagreement, right? The way I look at it is I don't want anybody to teach my kids how to think.
Yeah.
Give them facts and the data and allow them to come to some conclusion.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah. What I said, what I think is, because I teach logic. So what I want to, when I say teach them how to think, I don't mean teach them what to think. I mean, I need to equip them so they know the laws of logic so they can draw conclusions.
Right. All you have to do is listen to some legislators and you kind of come to your own conclusion, right?
Yep,
Especially in debate. And I would be happy to debate the smartest professors at ASU or any state universities in the nation, any university in the nation about.
I want to set that up. I've been saying the same thing. I said to those 39 professors, I'll debate you publicly one at a time or all at once.
Right.
Because we need to get these ideas out there. And all I've gotten back so far are insults. They make another meme out of me a couple of days ago where they put me and Senator McCarthy from the 50s together and said we're twins because he was hunting for Marxists in the government. Right. So they're making fun of me for saying. I said, wait a minute, you guys are the ones who said you're Marxists. If you're not Marxist, I won't use the word. That's fine. But they make memes and they make fun of people, but they don't know how to actually have a debate.
Right, Dr. Anderson, set it up. Here's a guy that wasn't born speaking English.
Yeah.
But all of them are way ahead of me in the language side. So why not debate some poor immigrant from who doesn't have a PhD in anything, just a lowly state legislator.
Well,
let's have a conversation about freedom.
I'm gonna promote that. That's a great place to kind of wrap up our interview, because that'll lead to our next interview. We'll come back with a report to all the listeners. Did anyone accept? But I'm gonna try to set this up. I'm gonna put this out there and say, let's hold a debate at ASU about free speech. Who will accept the challenge?
Real quickly, you remember the question I asked, I believe, Dr. Kenny?
Which one?
Would you defend me?
Oh, yeah.
If professors at a state university call me a white nationalist, would you defend me? And I think in some way his words were, it's hypothetical.
Yeah. Why not just say yes?
The answer should have been yes.
Yeah, should have been unqualified yes, of course.
We will defend you because you don't look like a white nationalist. You don't have policies that define you as a white nationalist. I've been in office for 3 years. You ought to be able to find a single vote that says Quang is a white nationalist.
Right.
Go find it. And then if I go to a state university, which I will be going soon, he should have stood there at the podium and said, Quang, I will defend you.
Yeah, well, that's right. And just so everyone knows, that's the dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences in Tempe. So kind of the flagship college of ASU. And yeah, he should have been able to just say, even if it's hypothetical, yes, we'll defend you. Because for us to discuss Marxism, again, these professors identify as Marxists. For them to call you a white nationalist because you have conservative beliefs about economics or the Second Amendment is just name calling.
Right. Exactly.
So, okay. So we're going to try to get a debate going.
Yes, sir.
I'm very excited about it. I've been hoping this would happen because I want to hear, just give me one argument from the left. You whoever's on the left, just put together one argument where you have premises supporting a conclusion. You don't use insults. And Representative Nguyen will be there, was willing to do it.
Find one vote.
Yeah.
That I made a mistake in exposing my white nationalism. Right. or,
All right.
or build it and introduce. So thank you so much, Dr. Anderson. I
Yeah,
really
well, it's been wonderful. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, we'll be back then, and we'll fill everyone in. Either we'll come back with a date of when the debate is, or we'll come back with the excuses they gave us.
Yes.